Well, I think the hour being the real time, 3 o'clock, this February 1st of 2021, meeting of the Agenda and Priorities meeting with Town Council. We call this meeting to order. Um, We have an agenda. Any additions or deletions? No, not. All in favor of the motion? Oh, we need a motion.
I would make the motion that we accept the agenda as presented.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. All in favor of the motion? Carried. Okay, the first item on the agenda would be an update from the ECC verbal.
Thank you, Your Worship.
CAO Becker.
So I think Council doesn't mind, we'll go through the path forward framework that was announced on Friday, just so we have clear understanding of what that means. Maybe before that, just kind of back up into what's currently part of the restrictions for what I understand. As we know, as of effective December the 8th, indoor social gatherings remain intact. All indoor social gatherings are prohibited, public and private, with only close contacts and limited to household members only. People who live alone can have up to 2 close contacts. Outdoor social gatherings, actually I might be tying into other parts of this, but that's one area I really wanted to focus in on. One thing that I want, before going into the step 1 of the path forward, one thing that Dr. Henshaw mentioned, part of the administrators' engagements every Tuesday, is that once they announce changes in the restrictions, there is a residual or a domino communication process that they hear back from the different stakeholders, which some of the restrictions may be adjusted based on feedback. So putting emphasis on feedback, if council wishes to exercise any feedback, you can certainly do that through myself and the team that participates in the Tuesday meetings, Dr. Henshaw, or of course with the MLA. So just continue to exercise your voice, council, if that's what you deem desire to do so. So step 1, as we heard on Friday, that if we maintain under 600 hospitalizations, there is some adjustments to restaurants and pubs and establishments in similar fashion. Maximum of 6 people per table, individuals from the same household, or the 2 close contacts for people living alone. Children's sports and performance activities related to school, such as phys ed classes, will be resumed. K-12 schools are allowed to use off-site facilities to support educational activities, which, for what I read into that, is joint use activities, i.e. swimming pool and the arena and curling club, perhaps. No sports games, team practice, etc. However, there is one-on-one training. So if we can maintain that as of February the 8th, under 600, then it'll proceed. And then going to the step 2, and again, not a lot of details on step 2, but under 450 hospitalizations, there's potential of easing in the areas of retail, business, banquet halls, community halls, conference centers, hotels, for their easing of indoor fitness and children's sports and performance. I did feel to mention indoor fitness as part of step 1. Step 3, under 300 hospitalizations, potential easing in the areas of adult team sports, casinos, racing centers, and bingo halls, indoor social gatherings with restrictions, indoor seated events such as movie theaters and auditoria, libraries, museums, art galleries, zoos, interpretive centers, places of worship. And then under 150 hospitalizations, potential easing in the areas of amusement parks, concerts for indoor, festivals, indoor and outdoor, funeral receptions, indoor entertainment centers and play centers, performance activities, sporting events, indoor and outdoor, trade shows, wedding and ceremonies, and workplaces, which certainly affects the town of Innisfail. So those are what we've heard as of Friday. We'll probably get a little bit more detail tomorrow once we have some direct feedback from the chief medical officer. And certainly just to, I guess, add into that, I did hear from the library manager and wanted to make it clear to town administration, but I'm directing it over to council, that this was a part of where we can exercise our voice, so we can agree with these steps, or we can provide that direct feedback to the appropriate individuals to indicate what that effect is, on the good or positive or the negative. But I think there is some opportunity for some voice to be considered, especially when it comes to something like the library. As we know, the library's mandate has changed over the last several years, and more than just what we've known libraries for as we've matured through our lives. To me, it's created more of an essential service to the community than a soft service. And through Tara Downs, the manager, indicated that some of the additional services that they provide here, and largely throughout at least central Alberta, there are the library helps create elimination of barriers for computer access, for such as we know that the library is hooked up to SuperNet, that is full access to the internet. A lot of people use that service for employment searches. So without the library service, I think we are creating some barriers within our community. Libraries also service students. So not all students are homed or housed in the schools. Some may be at home doing their studies, but the library is a source for gathering information, and is very cost efficient, really no cost to provide those services for students and people seeking employment, etc. So just kind of planting a seed in that area, but there's could be other areas that you say, you know what, these steps are right on target, or it's a good start, or you know what, just continue using our voice and communicate the impact of these steps, and continue that conversation. So certainly happy to have any answer your questions that you may have regarding what I heard with this framework, and then see if council has anything else you'd like to add.
Councillor Barclay.
Yeah, through to CEO Becker, I'm glad to hear that the manager of the library reached out to you. We were speaking on the weekend and I suggested she do that. I think it's really important what she had to say around, employment opportunities for people, and having access to that library where people don't have that at home. So I would like you to take that message forward in your weekly meetings. And I don't know, like the one-on-one fitness, as far as that, does that mean you can have like one-on-one training inside the arena? Is that an option for people? I know Hockey Alberta, Steve Hogle they've been working behind the scenes for quite a while, I think, trying to find solutions and stuff. And I don't know how much feedback you have had in your weekly meetings about that, and if you could enlighten us on that. But, I like the benchmarking. It runs the whole gamut, but I can tell you, we have people at both ends of the spectrum on this, right? You have people that COVID isn't even real, to people that are furious about this, that we're actually loosening at this point in time. So trying to find that balance in the community and being cognitive of, businesses that are struggling. I know business here in town, they're not even going to open come February the 8th for dine-in, because they want to keep their staff safe, and they just don't feel that it's the right time. So each to their own, but I guess any feedback, all the feedback that you can give us from the conversations that you're having weekly with Dr. Hinshaw would be greatly appreciated, and kind of where some of these things are heading.
Okay, Councillor Bates, you.
Yes, through to the CEO with respect to the discussion of the library. So I guess the question I would have is, do they have a bit of a model of how they would like to operate? Because there would be a difference, obviously, between it being fully open and some model that fit what they felt comfortable with.
Yeah, I believe through an appointment process easily could be achieved. So if you want to access any IT areas or even the library perhaps, under some controls. There could be through an appointment, just like any other retail type of an establishment.
So that certainly sounds reasonable. I don't know what process you'd have for us to lend our voice.
Well, my feedback to the manager was certainly we can engage with all the other administrators on Tuesday. I advised to utilize PRL, Parkland Regional Library, because they do have a voice as a regional service onto government. Council can utilize your elected official status through the MLA or any other, as you did even with your letter recently to the premier, or all of the above. So
Okay, well, I
it's
guess
really up to council.
for my part, I'd be happy to consider any such request like that, because I think they could create a model that we could get behind, I'm sure. That's my input.
Even, turn it over to Megan, my own view, and may fit in with staff's thoughts or not, but even such things as the aquatic center, through an appointment, there's control mechanisms. I know it's cleaning and is still public access, but through an appointments type of a system, you're not going to get the numbers that you would with a larger facility like that, but at least you'd have some access. I'm not sure, Megan, if you have any thoughts in that regard.
Yeah, so we are hoping to next week look at one-on-one private lessons if people are looking for swimming lessons. We're still looking for some clarity as to whether we could look at lane swim or if it has to be one-on-one, meaning there would have to essentially be a guard for every lane that's being utilized. But we are gonna go down that road of seeing what kind of interest there would be in private lessons for kids. We've also had some correspondence from through the figure skating group from Skate Canada about what their potential could look like. So they're having a board meeting later this week to see what kind of interest they might have. So we'll work with them. Based on what I've digested from the regulations, they're probably the only group that could utilize the arena in the next 3 weeks until we find out if we go to the next step. So we'll be working with them as well.
Your worship, through to Director Jenkins, with the pool, do you think there'd be the ability of, say, a family to rent?
From what I read right now, I don't think so, but I'm hoping through the week as we get opportunities to ask these questions, we'll get a little bit more clarity on some of those things.
I certainly understand, and like the kids are a big factor here for sure, getting some ways of easing them, the pressure on them. But I think I'm getting feedback from the adult, I guess, side of the community that are really feeling the lockup sensation of this whole thing, and they can't even have somebody over for coffee. And I keep being asked that, but I'm a little disappointed that they didn't take some of that into consideration. In that, I don't think you're even allowed to have anybody over unless you put them all in with that indoor social gathering in step 3 before you can have somebody over to your house. And I just find that to be the biggest headache in the community, other than the kids and things, to get them going too. But that's where this lockup feeling is starting to wear on people, and starting to get a little antsy. So I'd like them maybe consider saying, okay, you can have a couple over. I understand they're being careful about it and avoiding house parties and that kind of thing, which is an issue, and I'm sure that was a problem. But if you had a limitation on of 2 or 3 people or something, guests in a household or whatever, but that to me is something I think should be revisited. The other thing is, I'm not really keen on, I don't think it's gonna be quite as easy as we look at this, like every 150 people every 3 weeks, potentially. That's not gonna happen in my mind. I don't think we're gonna get below 400 probably until this whole thing is, until the vaccination programs are starting to take effect, because I don't think it's gonna come down quite that easily without, I think we'd be fortunate to see it get much better than it is right now for the next 3 or 4 months. And because of, until the vaccination, because we're not even going to see a vaccination program that's going to have an impact for till April. Go, you know, they can't even get the vaccine for it. So uh, I'm a little concerned that the stepping process might be difficult to use hard line to say, oh, there's 455, we got to keep it for another 3 weeks or something. It's just, I mean, I'm hoping they take that into consideration, because these numbers aren't going to go down by themselves until there's a real impact of the vaccination, and that not going to be for quite a while. So if they could consider some softening of the social part of the community, that's not a problem area until it becomes, you know, uncontrollable strangers and party situation. But
But
that's, you know,
Your worship, I think that we have to keep in mind though that, I mean, that this whole plan is to protect the healthcare system. And, you know, it wasn't very many weeks ago where Red Deer was bulging at the seams and you know, it doesn't take much to get there again. I think in Innisfail, South Red Deer County, we've gone from, what was it? Mike Barkley was sharing 51 cases a few weeks ago to now we're around 16. So, you know, these measures do work, and if people comply, they will work even better. And, you know, the more we open, of course, probably the more things will change. But to me, the benchmarks, hopefully it's kind of like the stick and the carrot, right? People comply and do what we're supposed to do. We have something that at least we know we can work towards these other areas. And you know, like you, I'm probably thinking that, you know, we won't get to some of them, and probably unless we see, I mean, we're going to see more vaccination rollout without question, and that's going to take some time. But I think we really have to keep in mind, even in our own community in central Alberta here, that we have to be mindful of hospitalization rates and impacts on ICU and healthcare staff, and what it's doing to other parts of the healthcare system. You know, people are having surgeries canceled because there's not room in the hospital for them. So, you know, we have to keep working at this together collectively, and I hope that's the message coming out of the town of Innisfail.
well, you know, I'm just, I'm looking back at when the numbers took a surge after Halloween, before Christmas, and imposed some strict, you know, restrictions at that point, and it certainly did have an impact. The fact that they were testing about 6,000 or 8,000 less people in a day too, that made quite a difference. But anyways, that's the only real big, other than getting the small businesses opened up to some extent, is that kids and the social mental health factor of the adults. It's a little testy right now. So I know, but it's hard to tell someone, well, it's going to be another 6 months before we get down below 300 people. Well, time will tell, I guess. And I'm not trying to be naysayer or anything. I'm just saying that it's going to be hard for these benchmarks to work until the vaccination kicks in.
Your worship, just my own thoughts. I was glad to see them come out with this structure, because I think it is keyed to hospitalizations, which ultimately is the indicator of where our health system sits. And it also gives people a chance to look at what our current government feels are the most important things and working down to the less important things. And I would wager that they don't know times and that they would maybe change some of this down the road. Maybe, if they get stuck at step 2 and they feel good, they maybe change those numbers. I just feel it's a good start, and yeah, happy to support it the best way I can, I guess. Thank you.
Any other comments? Councillor Hill?
Yes, your worship. So obviously, with the comments of any potential feedback, I think that, we look at our advocacy piece as to, where do we potentially see things that might be within step 3 that we might want to see, moved up to step 2, or what we think our community, our needs, how we could best represent that. So I think, seeing this in front of us now, I think at some point in time, we should give some formal direction as if there is any interest in moving something or adding something to really fulfill our advocacy piece. So that's just a discussion topic that was brought up, and I think to actually give some answers to it later on in the meeting would probably be appropriate, or table it for another discussion.
Your worship's here to see you, Becker. So tomorrow when you have your weekly administrative meeting with Dr. Hinch, are you going to talk about potential library opening or restricted opening, or do you need a motion for that, or?
No motion required,
Okay.
Councillor Barkley. There's like hundreds of us on the call. So we type it in, we don't have a direct connection. So it's not the most, it is one way to communicate based on community. But to be successful, you need to exercise your other channels of communication with different stakeholders, but we'll certainly throw that out as a question. We have a half an hour, so people are even going on early to fire in their question before time, but it's one way. We'll certainly pose the question, and then maybe really consider what other communication links they have administratively beyond that weekly half an hour. I'm sure we can submit to her administratively anytime, probably just on the base results of their decisions on the impacts.
Any other questions of the CAO? Okay, well, it's encouraging to work on the communications. It sounds like they want to have a little more hands-on feedback to help them out on their decision-making. Okay, I guess if that's, there's no more comments, someone prepared to make a motion to accept this report? Update, I guess.
Your worship, I'll move that we accept the verbal report and appreciate the graphics. Thank you.
Okay. All in favor of the motion? Carried, thank you. All right, we have a FCSS report. Thanks, Karen.
Thank you. So I'm before you today just to give you an overview of what 2020 looked like for us. It was a different year for sure. And it was always my goal to do a yearly report, but it seems like year 5, we hit it. So this is kind of to give you a review of what we've been at over the last year. Okay. All right. So the first part is just what was in the strategic plan when it came to promoting social well-being in the community by connecting people with supportive environments and resources. So in 2020, some of the things that we worked on was the Movers and Groovers program that started off really, really big. Just in January till March, we had 2,525 participants, and that was 3 times a week on average, anywhere from 80 to 100 people per day. That was discontinued in March because of the pandemic, and then it just started again on Zoom in October. I'm not sure why it's writing what I'm saying. Okay, I have no idea. All right, CHIPS was discontinued in March. 378 participants compared to normally we have about 1,600 plus participants in that program. The Community Volunteer Income Tax Program, we had one volunteer. She's just an amazing volunteer. She completed 189 returns for our program, and total recoveries and refunds back to residents in our community is approximately $931,000, which is quite significant. This is our first year where we've actually participated in the evaluation piece for FCSS. The previous year, I think there was like 12 programs across the province that did the evaluation, and there was like millions of dollars recovered. So this was our first year participating to see, you know, what impact is that having for our residents. So that's quite significant money coming back to our residents. Seniors Week, we did treats for the week. We could not do the garden party, so we just had to be creative. Did treats for the week. 4 local businesses participated, and we had about 670 participants for that. Volunteer Week, we did a similar thing and had about 170 participants. So just trying to figure out ways to still recognize the seniors and the volunteers in the community, but again, not able to meet in person certainly makes that challenging. Got some really good ideas again for this year, so we'll kind of see what happens when I start that planning. Positive Tickets program ran again this year. I think that was really important. Really important initiative that is continuing. The RCMP and bylaw do give out those tickets. This year, from what I could see, there was about 112 tickets given out, somewhere around 400 plus over the last 2.5 years given out to youth or individuals in the community. Kids Have Stress 2 program, that's a program that was facilitated in all grade 1 classes. Last year we had 8 of 12 sessions completed when the pandemic caused the cancellation, but that went really well. We had 4 volunteers, myself and a school staff member participate in that. So just a really, really good program, and we're just trying to, again, the school won't be opening for now, so we'll start our planning for the fall session and see how that goes. Volunteer Connector database, that's a new database that we started using instead of us advertising for organizations on their behalf. They can now do their own advertising and recruitment of volunteers. So that just took that off of our plate, but it actually provided a much wider range of organizations in town being able to access that. So individuals, you can do it as an organization, you can post your volunteer ads, but as an individual looking for volunteer opportunities, you can go in and search by you know, your areas of interest, you can search by demographic. So just a really, really good tool. So we are really directing our organizations to that tool for sure. Friendly Callers program continued throughout the pandemic. I believe right now we have 6 or 7 matches. So a volunteer will actually call the resident once a week. It's actually really, really cool to hear some of what's happened as a result of that program. We have people just starting by a phone call, and they've just decided on the side, they've met in person, they've had coffee, however that's facilitated, and they've made lifelong friendships. We have a resident that actually moved. I don't know if they moved at a province. I think it was at a province, and they still connect with their volunteer on a regular basis. And they just talk about how much value they get from that. So we're hoping to really really put that program out there in a bigger way this year, because we know that the loneliness and isolation is just increasing. So we want to definitely target those individuals. This year we made changes to Snow Angels and Garden Angels program. So we no longer do the matching program. So far, I've not heard anything negative about it, but we did provide some really good options, including we will help facilitate that registration to Snow Angels Canada. If residents do not have the ability to do so, we will sign them up on their behalf. We also provide signage to them that they can post. They can either adhere it to a deck railing or put it up in a window. So if someone's going by, they can see that a snow angel is welcomed at that residence. Plus, we also offer that if they want a list of snow removal companies in town, we will give them that list, and we give them information where if they're under a certain income threshold, they could get those funds recuperated through the seniors benefits if eligible. So we've really tried to make sure that they have some options there. So the 2A South Regional Transit pilot project did get extended till March 31st. We are meeting hopefully again soon. We were supposed to meet in January and that got canceled. So we're hopefully meeting to come up with some recommendations or just some things that we can bring back to our mayor and councils, that if you were to look at this further, this might be some things that you would want to consider. So we'll be meeting hopefully in the next few weeks to put together that information. Information and referral services, we're still busy, not as busy with walk-ins as we were last year, but still significant, and considering that we had a pandemic. We're in a pandemic. Walk-ins around 353 walk-ins and meetings, referrals to programs and services, whether locally or regionally, about 489. Phone calls and emails, there's just always tons and tons of phone calls and emails between the two of us. So that's in the thousands. Like, that's our best guesstimate. And that's only what we get incoming. That does not include any return phone calls or emails at all, just what's coming into our email boxes and our telephones. Dementia-friendly community and community partners in action. So that was a really, really great project to be involved with this year, and really excited to see the work that's been done. We did dementia-friendly kits that were provided to first responders. We're still working on some additional kits for victim services. I think the fire department, I'm not sure if they've got theirs yet. And we're also looking at doing those kits for when we run the Compass Caregivers group, so that our caregivers, when they finish that group, they have a toolkit that they can use with their loved one, just to really help ease some of that stress that they might be facing. Also, we are one of 5 communities that Health Canada has provided a $750,000 grant for a research project. So that $750,000 covers all 5 communities. And that is to do a research project on how communities are responding to working with families and individuals with dementia. So that's really, really exciting that we were chosen 1 out of 5 in Alberta. So it's really great to be part of that project. The Youth Positive Assets Coalition, they were continuing to meet. In February, a youth action committee was started. They had, I think, 2 meetings, and then COVID hit. So, but they were awesome. The youth that were involved with that wanted to continue meeting. So they've been meeting ever since on Zoom. So they still planned events for Youth Week. They've done a couple of Jackbox Games nights. They started an Instagram page. The last time I checked, it was at 145 followers. That could be more again. They did New Year's youth activity bags, and they presented to the Rotary Club as well. We did a written report to the Rotary, but we also presented in person just to answer any questions. The Innisfail Interagency Network has continued to meet. I think we just missed, I believe it was March or April, but they've continued to meet and just collaborate and just continue to work together and see how everybody continues to maneuver during the pandemic with services, how their services are impacted. And we always bring in a training component to that meeting as well, some kind of education or awareness for all of our community partners. coalition work. So since I've been with the town of Innisfail, I've been part of the Regional Vision for Nonviolence. They just changed their name actually at our last meeting in November, sorry. And that's now Impact Central Alberta. So I just took over the chair of that in the fall at November's meeting. The exciting thing about this is they changed the name to Impact Central Alberta because there's an organization called SAGES. Under SAGES, this impact initiative is facilitated. And that just means that they're building a provincial framework so that anybody who are working on preventing sexual or domestic violence, we're all working on that together as like a province. So instead of everybody kind of doing their piecemeal part. So our group agreed, made a decision that we should align with what's happening provincially. That may have future impacts for funding and those kinds of initiatives as well. So that was a really, really good group. And we're really trying to shore up what we want to do in the coming year or year and a half for sure. Central Alberta Rural Communities Coalition, that again is about maybe, I think it's 8 or 10 of our communities. So we look at what are some of the common issues among some of our rural communities. A lot of our partners are FCSS partners, victim services, some of those. And we talk about like, what are some of our challenges and how can we coordinate our efforts as 10 communities to make sure that we're giving out consistent messaging and providing support to our residents. Coordinated community response to elder abuse. We now have our own. We were part of a larger one that came out of Sylvan Lake. Again, we very much do a lot of regional collaboration, which we know right now government has certainly been looking at and keeping their eye on. So we now, out of the Sylvan Lake, we formed our own smaller coalition because that was the funding project for, I think, 3 years. So we formed our own last year, and our communities include Innisfail, Bowden, Penhold, Spruceview, and Springbrook. So we're working as our 5 immediate communities to say, how do we work together to support one another? So rather than all 5 of us trying to plan our own events, for instance, for Seniors Day or Elder Abuse Awareness Day, we're going to plan it together and then try and rotate it to the community. So, you know, often in our surrounding communities, there's just 1 or 2 staff like us as well. So then it's just a much better effort. CAPRA, Central Alberta Poverty Reduction Alliance, we stay connected with them. But again, that work has not been as consistent over the last year due to COVID. So, in November, we hired a new staff member. We also had a practicum student for the month, and we've got 2 new FCSS board members that started in October. We were thinking, how is it going to be a busy year? We were just as busy, I think, or more so, trying to maneuver. So again, how do we respond to COVID? So one of the things that the government did when they announced, I think it was $50 million initially towards funding, and one of the things they recognized right away is how do we get this funding out there very quickly? And they recognized that FCSS has those networks already established. So they put out the funding call through our FCSS programs, and the response was amazing. We had a number of applications from our community. McMahon Central and the Innisfail and District Ministerial did receive funds. And from what I remember, both combined was just under $40,000 that came back to our community. The ministerial got 5,000 and the rest was McMahon. And that was just really incredible what was done with that funding. Some of that contributed to those bags that we did, those wellness bags in December, but a lot of that went to counseling services, and that was utilized like incredibly by the community. They actually ran out of funding for the counseling piece. So that showed the need there for sure. The community resource form, online form, that was one that Ken had developed for us, and we had that right online because that way if someone needed anything, they could also send an email. I would get that through email and try and figure out what their need was and then respond accordingly. Some people will have access to email on Wi-Fi, but may not necessarily have minutes on their phone to call or ask for help, or if they couldn't come to the office. So that was, we had probably about a half a dozen, I think, inquiries on that. The community resource postcard, we printed 5,000 of those and actually mailed those to every household in Innisfail, just as a starting point, because we often get the calls here and they say, you know, where do I go for this or where do I go for that? So we just thought that's a really great starting point for people. And it was a really good investment for that. We have just a few cards left that we'll give out for other in other things throughout the year. Innisfail Connect Zoom programming, that is starting to really get a lot of traction now. That again forced us because we couldn't meet in person. Our community partners in action group, our AHS rec therapist, she's just phenomenal. She started putting a lot of this together. So we have a calendar that goes out every month, and the calendar is very busy. So now we have groups like Movers and Groovers and Falls Prevention that do meet on Zoom. And we're actually starting to get more seniors that are getting tablets or iPads, and they're starting to interact and just extremely excited. But it's still very challenging to get to all of the seniors that we would like to, right? Because some are just not comfortable with that. So providing what we can right now and hoping to connect in other ways with those that don't have those resources. Bingo is getting pretty popular. They do online coffee break. They do healthy moves, digital drop-ins. So that's really getting some nice traction. And yeah, that gets put out. They do a 2-month calendar at a time. So community conversations. So just based on talking to community partners about what was going on around town, I just wanted to call them together in several meetings. Just to make sure that we're all on the same page, because I know it's really hard when you hear, oh, this agency might have already been working on something and we could have probably worked together. So I just invited them to a conversation, and the domestic violence, substance use, mental health, and suicide, that's gone really great. We've had some really, really rewarding discussions, and out of that discussion came that Real Talk with Men campaign. And that's just really just went so big, but that came out of that. And that group is talking about a phase 2 now. Where do we go from here? That was just step 1. The other conversation that we started, and this was primarily started because of a change in funding. You might remember that last year we had a decrease in funding from the government around child and youth services. Another agency in town also had a big decrease. But thankfully, our community still got a lot of that funding just through McMahon, so that Family Resource Network. So I just wanted to make sure again that we're working off of the same page and we're supporting one another and working together on initiatives. We just made the decision actually that all of the youth related matters will move to the YPAC table, and the group wanted to continue to meet but focus on that child and family piece, because there is no coordinated conversation around, you know, how do we continue to support children and families during the pandemic. So we'll be continuing to meet about that just to see if there are other initiatives that as a collective group that we could look at. We also had been having housing and homelessness conversation. We had our last meeting last week, which was really, really good discussion on that. So looking at how do we prepare for potential challenges when it comes to, you know, we know that housing is an issue, not just for families, but for our seniors. We, from time to time, we have transient individuals. We have homeless sometimes that comes through our community, and we have individuals that actually reside at some of our hotels. So how do we best support that? So just looking at where do we even start with that process? In place of Kids Have Stress 2 this year, I coordinated with the schools and said, okay, is there something else that we can do to still support children being able to voice their, whether it's to voice their concerns or stresses. I found a really, really nice gratitude journal online while on Amazon, and I sent it to the schools and said, is this something you would utilize with your students? And they identified the grade 4 students right now just as, you know, really challenging when it comes to dealing with stress in response to COVID, what's happening with COVID. So we purchased gratitude journals for all of our grade 4 students. So they're working through those journals with administration. And some of the feedback we're getting has just been really positive, that the kids look forward to doing their journals each day, and they're just really having those conversations. So that's been really positive. The Real Talk with Men campaign, you heard me mention that previously. We initially started with 1,500 calendars, wondering if we were going to be able to give them out. They were gone in a week, and we had to order another 1,000. The 10,000 coasters, a lot of the restaurants were totally on board with that, and such a positive response. We still have some coasters, which will continue to go back to the restaurants again a little bit later. A lot of the challenge with not giving them out in full right now is because a lot of the restaurants are still closed. We also did 800 posters. We actually started with 300 and ended up ordering more because we wanted to also target our businesses. So we sent 180 packages out to our local business community as well. So far, I did have one local business contact me and said, can we get more of those calendars and some of those posters as well for our break room, and just have to have available for our staff. The photo gallery, as far as I know, I believe that's still displayed at the Coffee Cottage as well. So if you've not been to see there's extra photos there that were not in the calendar, but it's a really nice display there. So I would encourage you to check that out. And that was a joint effort again, Primary Care Network, FCSS, and then McMahon chipped in a little bit for the gallery display. The winter activity kits, that was with the Community Partners in Action again. A lot of collaboration over the last year. 1,100 kits were assembled and distributed. Again, we were wondering, okay, our big goal was to get the resources into the hands of the residents. So how do they know where to call if they need support? So we wanted to make sure we were getting information out there about mental health, substance use, healthy eating, exercise, wellness, and emergency numbers, as well as crime prevention. We put in other activities as well. With Christmas coming, we knew that a lot of people would still be isolated, not able to visit family or have friends in. So we put in things just like coloring sheets, sketchbooks, a Christmas craft, whatever we could put in. We put in decks of playing cards that had wellness tips on the cards. So we just tried to be really creative, and we've actually had a number of such favorable responses on that. I had another email actually last week that said they so appreciated the kit and they utilized it over the holidays, and it really helped break up that for they and their spouse. So I actually had another young couple who emailed me and said, my husband and I are having competitions to see who can complete the word searches the quickest, but just really appreciate it, having some of those activities to do so, but really, really worthwhile. Community development, again, where are we headed in 2021? So it's continuing those community conversations again with our community partners. So, you know, we partner with the Henday, the library, McMahon, the Chinook's Edge, as many as we can partner with, because we don't want any of our partners feeling like they have to go it alone or figure it out. So we see that as continuing. That's a big part of where we're going in 2021. The CHIPS facilitation, that will be transitioning to McMahon. With the decrease in funding that I got, that's where I was running that program out of. So the CHIPS facilitation will transition to McMahon. We will still partner where possible just for the space till the end of 2021, once they're able to meet again at the LLC. And then McMahon will decide from there. We may continue to partner after that. It's just that we wanted to commit to just supporting that transition. So it was pretty smooth for the participants. Movers and Groovers, that registration piece, that recreation piece, that's become largely a recreation program. We'll still have a social component, which I'll still support, but that recreation piece will transition to recreation. We'll continue to collaborate with FCSS and Recreation to see if are there more things that we can do together collectively. Age friendly this year will be a big part of where we're going. Mayor and council received the recommendations in October of 2020, 2019. I got to think for a minute. And then back last March, again, we presented, I came before you again. So now we've hired Sandy in November. We're working with our community partners again to move that forward. We definitely see age friendly as being the banner, the big banner with a number of subsections under that where there'll be focused initiatives for sure. But again, that's a community conversation. That's a community effort. We are in the process of rebranding some of our FCSS materials, updating our FCSS content on our website as well. And the other big thing this year will be to just look at that emergency social services piece again. How do we coordinate our efforts for that? The big piece for me is the reception center, sorry. So if there is an emergency or disaster, it's, making sure that we get that reception center up and running, that we have volunteers that can help man that. So that'll be things that we'll want to work on again this year. Under YPAC, again, some of the things that are in our community action plan under our YPAC initiative is to look at some youth-friendly spaces. Are there spaces that we can designate towards youth events and activities? It's been brought to us before about considering, is there an opportunity to work together on a youth community pass? So, a youth could get a pass, but that might mean that they could go to the golf course or to the ski hill or to the Dino Center or to the pool or drop-in programs. So is there something like that that might be beneficial to our youth? Mentorship right now, and I know that Alberta Mentorship as well is saying there is a massive need for mentors in our communities to mentor our youth, and that is true. So, is that something that our YPAC coalition will look at? So we've got that on our community action plan. And then again, if we can't get in front of the kids in the first place, then we're not going to get those other messages about wellness and mental health. So again, how do we do activities and programming to support our youth and to engage them in positive activities? And, get in front of them so we can get those bigger messages later on. Community events, again, it may not look like it has in the past, the Volunteer Week and the Garden Party. So we're looking at, again, how do we do that this year? Enhanced community partnerships. So we are partnering with Chinook's Edge and McMahon to look at a flourishing life assessment. As a community, our last full needs assessment was in 2014. So it's definitely dated now, but Flourishing Life definitely looks at where are the strengths in our children and youth and where are some of the challenges, because then we can more target our programs to where some of those challenges are. It's easy for us to say, oh, we should do this or we should do that. But if it's not targeting a specific need, then we're just doing a program. So we want to definitely make sure that we're maximizing where those needs are identified in the community. So we're working with them, and Dr. Wayne Hammond, he's the one that created the Flourishing Life Assessment. He's working with us on our project. So I did some training last week with them, and it's going to be awesome. It's going to give us some really, really good data that's going to help form, things like YPAC, like where do we go down in the next 3 to 5 years. So that's really good. So we continue to look at FCSS training opportunities and webinars as they become available. One of the things that's happening through our provincial office is there's training being coordinated through our FCSS Association of Alberta for our directors. So there's some really great opportunities there. And one of the opportunities as well is a national certification around trauma-informed care as well. That's being offered to our directors and our FCSS staff for free. We know that as we go forward in COVID, there's going to be more individuals that are certainly experiencing trauma and mental health crisis. So there's some really good opportunities there for training. Our department now has the Innisfail Fee Assistance Program. I suspect that as that rolls out this year, that we will get a lot of requests. We will still refer accordingly to programs such as Kids Sport and Jumpstart and the Turnquist Foundation, the Helping Hands. But this is more for those programs that are kind of outside of those parameters. So, and not every child or youth is a sports kid, right? So could they use those funds for drama or theater or a paint night or all kinds of those initiatives? So I'm really excited to see where that goes this year. And then again, funding applications and staffing, those things just come as the needs arise throughout the year. Nothing immediate, but we continue to just keep an eye on that. And that's it. So it's been a very busy year. Thinking first, oh, what did we do this year? When I sat down and started looking at it, I'm like, oh, we did a lot more than I realized.
Karen, I just can't thank you enough for the efforts you put into this. Every year you astound us with your ability to be organized. How many people do you have helping you organize this report?
Myself and Sandy just started. I was 6 months during COVID. We didn't, but we just kind of needed to see where we were at with that.
Like
So-
I know that like the CEO, he's got about 10 people that are doing this kind of stuff.
But I think it's the collaboration, right? I think that has been key for us. Like we have really good community partners, and we had good community partners before COVID. And I think that's really strengthened it even since COVID, like to a whole other level for sure. Because we can't do it by ourselves. So
No,
Yeah.
I understand. But anyway, so we thank you very much for
thank you.
the report. It's encouraging what you can accomplish with what you got. That's for sure. Any other questions of Karen?
Yes, your worship. Thanks again, Karen. I just one question that you kind of touched on was with the lack of funding this year, you said that McMahon was able to, partially fill the void with maybe potential dollars or our community received some dollars in lieu of, but whereabouts, if in your opinion, where do you feel what area had the biggest impact from the lack of funding for this year?
I know that Chinook's Edge was really impacted by the lack of funding, and they could certainly speak to that better, but I know that they ended up having to totally restructure their family wellness program. So that was certainly a big difference. Some of the initiatives that they would normally do outside of that family wellness piece, those will now be referred to like other services such as McMahon. So I'm still incredibly grateful that the funding has still come back through to our community, just in a different way, right? But child and youth, I think that's going to be a big area going forward. From what I understand, just in conversations, that mental health aspect is certainly big, not just for our adults, but for our children and youth for sure.
And I think the other question, part of that as well, is just, where is there, obviously, you guys do a great job of making sure that it's very limited to slots or cracks to fall through for anybody. But just wondering if there was a certain area that was impacted more from a lack of funding than any others, because I know you only have so much to work with. So.
Yeah, the thing that comes to me right away is there's probably never enough funding dollars for mental health counseling, for counseling in general. We have, first when I came here 5 years ago, I think we had 1 psychologist, 2 psychologists. Now we have somewhere around 8, and they're all pretty much at capacity from what I understand. But again, if someone does not have a plan through work, right, that will cover those counseling costs, it's really difficult to access. Some will have a sliding scale, but even on a sliding scale, if someone has lost their job because of COVID, they can't go to counseling because they don't have the funds. And the counseling services that are free, such as like mental health at the hospital, which is great, they're at capacity oftentimes, right? Or if they have to they refer to Red Deer for mental health because it's free. But if you don't have transportation, how do you get to Red Deer, right? So transportation and counseling supports, that's always 2 big areas where there's never enough funding right now, for sure.
Thank you, Karen.
Councillor Bates?
Yeah, I was just it kind of blends maybe a little bit into Councillor Hill's. Last year about this time, we had quite a bit of public concern about the specific drop in funding of boys and girls and Big Brothers.
Mhm.
And I guess the question I have is, do you feel our new and enhanced partnerships filled most of that void?
Totally. It totally will, like not to the capacity that we needed to yet because COVID. COVID has just limited anything in person that we can do. So I believe this year has really strengthened the partnerships. Like we have awesome working relationships with McMahon and the and Chinook's Edge, as well as the Red Deer Catholic system, because we have St. Marguerite's as well. So I believe that that will really help us. The limitations we had on the funding prior to the changes was that funding focused on 0 to 5 or 0 to 6. So if you were a family that had children 0 to 6, you could access services. But under the new model, they cover 0 to 18. So we can go to McMahon and say, or, you know, and say, well, this need has been identified among our youth population. How can we work together? So now that funding actually incorporates those ages, which I think is an enhancement for sure.
Okay, okay.
Your worship, through to Karen, you're amazing. Thank you so much for all you do in the community. I'm just so proud that, you know, you and your partners, all the stakeholders are delivering the services that you are to this community. It's, I know it's a model that's being watched and implemented or trying to implement across into other communities. But I think going back to Councillor Hill's question, and that was kind of what I wanted to ask too, but was about the counseling. Like, how do we address that? Because you're right. I mean, how is somebody going to access counseling when they don't have the money or they don't have a job? And what can we do as council or town, et cetera, to help in that respect? And
That's a loaded question. The thing is, like, there can be, through some FCSS programs, like some FCSS programs provide counseling, but counseling through FCSS is only mandated as short-term, which when I clarified with the province, that's 6 sessions or less. So that's pretty much to bridge you to longer-term supports or more solution-focused, right? So some of those shorter-term, again, you know, is $50 million is great, but that's spread over the province, right? So how do you know, there's going to be a need going forward for definitely more dollars. There's a lot of online supports that's been put in place. So again, some of that, Ken's been really good in putting out a lot of those resources. So I'll send resources to Ken and say, hey, this is a Government of Alberta one. This is a Government of Canada resource. So encouraging people to access those, because those are free as well if they don't have funding. But again, it'll come back to funding at some point. It'll come back. Some people just don't want to do online or do not have the ability to do online, right?
so are you short right now? Like in that area, is that one area that you would say we're not meeting the needs of the community and we probably won't go for the next few months because of?
I believe I could safely say yes, just in talking with our partners, like they're at capacity, and we're seeing issues like such as domestic violence and suicide ideation, and substance use totally on the rise for sure.
So what is a solution? Like, is it you need money? We need more professionals? Like,
Definitely funding for individuals to access services, because if they don't have those work plans, I did have a community partner, a counselor that said, how can I access more funding to be able to provide like counseling services to residents, either on a sliding scale or whatever that looks like. So I sent her information, probably 3 or 4 different funding pots that she could potentially apply for. And we're talking about everything from government to Royal Bank has a wonderful youth mental health initiative. Home Depot has funding for youth that may be at risk of homelessness or they're vulnerable. So I sent everything that I could send like that. Well, it was probably more than 3 actually, of places where she could potentially apply for funding. So then she could offer those services.
okay, so
Yeah.
is that something that FCSS could apply for? Like I'm quite familiar with the RBC program, and yeah, it's huge, and and certainly focused on mental health for
Mhm.
youth. And like, is that something where you could apply, or does it need to be the actual professional that's delivering that need?
A lot of the parameters around funding are very specific. Sometimes they'll say like municipalities can't apply, or
Okay.
it just depends on that funding criteria. So, and where possible, I put it to the agencies that can do it, because again, like our capacity is limited, right? And I don't want to apply for funding just to have it sitting in the bank and have to give it back.
Yeah.
Whereas if the organizations are getting it directly and can utilize it, it just makes more sense from a financial point too.
Well, I know you will keep an eye on it, and
Yeah.
I would think keep us informed. Did you want to say something? Sorry, Todd.
No,
Oh,
no,
okay.
please. I do have a question for
Yeah.
Karen. So maybe, is there opportunity to gather data? Does the interagency have that level of information to know what kind of funding Innisfail region perhaps, but for sure Innisfail, what kind of resources are being put into mental health programming initiatives? Because when you say could use more money, but I think the data to demonstrate that need would be, whether it's a mapping exercise, to demonstrate, here's the mapping of all the resources coming in, and we demonstrate that shortfall. And then whether it's council or, again, communication with the province, that, hey, we're short, we're focused on these areas, but we know mental health is a big issue. We
Yeah.
know that.
Yeah, for sure. We have a community partner that works with AHS, and AHS has a really, really good dashboard, a really great tool where they can actually select it based on need. And recently we had information on stats with suicide. We had information on stats around domestic violence. And just from what I can recall off the top of my head, one of the highest demographics right now for suicide and domestic violence in Alberta is between 20 and 39, the ages of 20 and 39. So again, that helps us go, okay, like what do we need to do differently there to get those messages out, right? So yeah, we could certainly get stats on some of the issues and maybe figure out as a collective group who's getting what funding and what else might be available. We can look at that.
Just wanted to say to Karen, thanks for everything you do. This is a great
Thank you.
report, and I suspect you probably had to do it at night because I don't see how you got it done during the daytime.
Yep. Yep. I'm working from home, so I don't have the phone ringing very often.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through to Karen. I have a couple comments and I think a couple questions. Comments more around homelessness, and I'm really happy to see that in the community conversation that you've started to address that, because I really think homelessness, we really don't see the amount of it. It's sort of a hidden kind of thing. It's out there. They're clients that don't really want to come and say, I don't have a home, but I think it could be worse than what we see. So I'm really glad that you've started that conversation. And then I don't know when you sleep, looking at your report here, sort of 24/7. So remember, wellness starts with thyself. So don't forget that. And the question that I have is around regional transportation. You had said that the pilot's going to end March 31st.
Yes.
And I guess the question I have is what happens April the 1st?
So our transportation committee is set to meet hopefully within this month. And I know that we are looking at options such as a secondary vehicle. I've learned about some other programs. So Megan and I have chatted a little bit and we have that information. There's a program through the University of Alberta. It's called Medically at Risk Drivers. They have funding potentially available. Plus, I just heard about another program called Drive Happiness. We're going to be having someone present on that at one of our regional coalitions in March. So that will give us an idea of what does that program look like, and is that something that could potentially work as well? Because I can bring that back to our transportation committee too.
Oh, very good,
Yeah.
because I know there's some individuals that use that bus quite regularly,
Yeah.
and they depend on it to get to Red Deer and back and forth. So with just as long as we keep that in mind, that it's going to be tough if we don't have something for
Yeah.
for our residents. So,
It definitely will be a gap for sure. I mean, like it's quite costly to do a return taxi cab fare for sure.
yeah, for sure. And again, thank you for all you do.
Thank you.
I too would like just have a second with you too, with the regional transit system. Is it going to be an option for us to do something just as a standalone, like Innisfail to Red Deer, or will you be looking at that, or are you still staying with a regional?
I think that's
Concept?
something that the transportation committee could certainly look at. But as a regional group, like it's been us and Penhold and Red Deer County, and then the city of Red Deer provides the bus, right?
Yeah.
So what we were going to do as a collective group was to say, okay, this is what we saw. These are some potential options. We know that some communities in Alberta are doing on-demand services. So you just call the bus and say, I need it at this time. They come and get you. That could be a regional. We could, as a community, if our transportation committee decides, we could choose to do our own thing. We have tried it in the past with the big bus to do even one trip a week. It was not feasible at all. That was first when I came here, and that did not work. So there would have to be definitely a different model, I think. But, something like that could potentially work and get traction if you had, for instance, like a secondary vehicle. But I think that's a conversation certainly for the transportation committee.
I think
Yeah.
hopefully we get the information, the stats and the ridership
Mhm.
numbers before the end of the program. And then-
Yeah, our goal was to bring it in this month. So I'm hoping we're still going to be able to do that. So our meeting got canceled a couple of weeks ago. So hopefully,
Okay, thanks, Councillor Hill.
Yes, and this might be a very redundant question, but the users, it has been identified that the pilot project is coming to an end, so they do have some they've already been in the loop that this service might be terminated, or is that still up in the air?
I'm still waiting for the Red Deer County marketing. So, because we want to do it jointly. So right now we know that, and we want to put out that message just to give people that heads up, right? But that's not been the case yet.
Okay, no, I just wanted to.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, once we have to start paying for it, might be a different story too. Anyways, look forward to that. Okay, no other questions? Have a safe day. All right, we have an incredible report here to receive. I think it'd be appropriate if we could have a motion to accept this report for information.
I will move we accept that report for information.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Barclay. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Oh, boy. Urban Hen pilot project discussion.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to follow up comments to the last report, I'm learning more and more about Innisfail and its social champion type of success in the community, and something that you don't see a lot of marketing. I know, how can we tie that back into really showcasing our community, everything that we're doing through Karen and her connections, and Megan, through Jennifer Wood and that weird group. Whatever they're called, we're the mix. But there's a lot of other social programming that we're really, I think, leading the charge on, that we really need to put a spotlight on. So that's something, just kind of put that out there a bit, but highly successful. So this report is coming to you, in a lot of kudos to Vanessa. I'm presenting it, but a lot of work has been done by Vanessa to get us to this point. And this report, I'm delivering it, but Vanessa will certainly chime in with some clarity. So before I get into the recommended actions, just a little bit of the history. Not all the history, but recent history. October 13, 2020, council gave direction for administration to prepare a report about posing a question on the 2021 municipal election ballot with the consideration of an urban hen pilot project. From there, at the November 9th council meeting, a report was given outlining the difference between plebiscite and referendum. That report was received as information and that administration to develop a criteria of an urban hen pilot projects in draft form. I believe the nature of that conversation at that time was, do we provide some sort of indication to the community as we advance into the election through the plebiscite, knowing that referendum is not going to work? And council gave that direction. Let's see what this program could look like, and then we can move it from there. So back to the recommended action to consider. What I'm recommending administratively is the council either moves towards a pilot project or do not do a pilot project. And to avoid posing a question on the election ballots in the form of a plebiscite. I just want to go back a little bit further and the reason why I state that is, I do respect the fact there was some confusion on the public engagement component with survey. We did hear that from the public, and council acknowledged that as well. So that is history. That's a learned lesson. However, it's up to council to really decide what has value and meaning to be placed on the council or the election ballot. So that's your decision. So you may say, no, a pilot project has enough significance in our community that we should be posing that question to the community through a ballot. Administratively, I say a pilot project of this nature, in my perspective, does not have that level of value to be put on the form of a ballot to the community for a pilot project. If you're doing a full project for program, maybe, but my experience with urban hen programs, pilot projects, if you decide to put one into play, is for a period of time to learn from that experience. And then you determine, yes, we'd like to have this program fully implemented into town operations, or we don't. So again, a pilot project, I think that the election on the ballot is for really something that's going to alter the community in some fashion. And that's my perspective. And my experience with urban hen is you're certainly have attention due to some of the communications and engagements we had. That's what drew the attention, maybe more so than the actual urban hen program. But as I highlight what a program could look like for you, you may say, hey, this, maybe we don't need to pose it to the question on a ballot, and we either don't do this or yes, let's go ahead. So I just want to kind of lay that framework, that landscape as I advance into this program review. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So just going into further on into the reports, as stated at the October 13th meeting, the main purpose of the bylaw that would regulate the urban hen program is to make sure that hens are taken care of. The health and well-being of the hens is the most important part of this program. The report also included a significant amount of detail highlighting and comparing other urban hen pilot projects within Alberta. Comparisons showed that municipalities operating urban hen programs are found to be successful when they implemented the following regulations and guidelines. Some of the key guidelines I'd like to point out, of course, be limiting the number of hens between 2 and 6, limiting the number of available licenses in the community, the applicant required to take a course regarding urban hens, the care and the coop maintenance, and best practices regarding operation management of urban hens. The applicant's requirement to register their PID, premises identification number, appropriate residential parcels only, fencing requirements, coop construction guidelines, coop setback regulations and site plan review, neighbor notification, and length of a pilot project, 1 or 2 years just to get that feel. Likely 2 is per recommendation if you proceed due to the amount of investment required to move into having that type of program or activity within your residential area. So attached to this report is the draft urban hen pilot program guidelines and regulations for your consideration. If you'd wish to advance into a program, a pilot project, the next step would become in the form of a bylaw. So attached to this is, you can see it, it does resemble a bylaw, but the next step would be, we'd come back to you in the form of a bylaw, maybe a little bit more detail to what your vision would be.
Okay, thanks, Mr. CEO. I guess, do we want to put it to a motion first and then open it for discussion? Someone prepared to make a motion?
Yep, I would definitely make a motion to advance discussion. As far as which recommended motion,
For the 2-year pilot?
yes, that would be correct.
Okay. So the motion is then to consider a 2-year pilot program. And I totally agree with Mr. Becker that,
Excuse me, your worship, I have a question.
I'm sorry, what?
This isn't a council meeting. Are we actually proceeding with motion or?
Actually, your worship, the councillor Bates, you can make a motion. You're not adopting a bylaw. You're directing administration to formulate a bylaw, a policy to come back at a further council meeting. So it is appropriate according to your
Okay,
procedure
thank you.
bylaw.
Sorry.
Anyways, I was just going to say, I agree with your comments about it going to the election. It's, to me, that's an option for something that it's too big for council, not prepared to, I guess, make a motion that might affect a large number of people. And to me, this is something that it's a tough decision, but we'd make lots of them all the time, and I don't see it anymore. I don't think anybody's consider it political in any way. But discussion.
So,
Councillor Barkley.
Your worship, through to, I guess, CEO Becker, with respect to the kind of the outline of the proposed bylaw right now, I just have a question around the fencing. I believe it said 6 feet fencing. Could we add in type of fencing? Like, I don't think it's appropriate for chain link fencing. I could see a lot of maybe issues happening if there's 2 or 3 or 4 chickens in one yard and a couple of dogs in another yard next door. And so I'm wondering if you have seen that, Vanessa. I'm wondering if you've seen that defined in other bylaws where type of fencing has been better defined. And certainly pilot, yes, but maximum of, I'm going to say 5 licenses in total. I know I think you've got one for every 1,500 people, so it's about 5 point blah blah something. But I would say 5 max, in my opinion.
I think the details we certainly can work out after the motion's been made, but the fact that it's just simply we want to proceed with the pilot project is, but help for the putting it together to come back to us with a final product. But anyways, Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I fully support the motion, and I'd like to speak in favor of it. We go back. I've had a number of inquiries about what we were doing, and the only concern that I have is that when we talked about it last fall, was that did we leave the impression with the public that we were going to actually go out and ask for some feedback on the ballot? And I guess that's and a great explanation there, CEO Becker, about, why, I think we can get around it with a pilot. And I certainly, like I say, I'm certainly in favor of the motion directing the administration to bring back some guidelines. And to your worship, I do have a number of questions, more operational questions around what those requirements might be, but we have to start someplace. So I guess that would be my comment. I'm totally in favor of the bylaw.
Councillor Reber?
Through to CAO Becker, do you have any estimate of what the cost to implement this would be, like the training for the bylaw and the different things? Because if we have, if we put out 5 licenses at 6 hens maximum, that's 30 hens. If it's costs us $10,000 to put a bylaw in for, it's pretty expensive. To buy a lot of eggs for that. I'm just wondering how do we do, what's it going to take to do this, I guess?
I can't anticipate, your worship, the Councillor Reber, that the training for enforcement would be of significant cost. It's kind of in their wheelhouse, enforcement. Anyway, there is some cost, would be that, and I don't have that number offhand. Of course, the licensing, follow-up. So there's a cost. I don't have a number that I could provide you. If it be 2,000 or 1,000, I can't imagine it'd be a significant
So
cost.
what do you think the recommendation, if we were to do this pilot project for 2 years with 5 licenses, where would you see it? If it's deemed successful, where do you see it going from there? Like how many licenses do you think? Would we increase those licenses, or do you think it would stay the same? Or
It really depends. Councilor Reber, it's my experience in another municipality. There was a lot of attention on the initial, I guess, spotlight on the program and awareness. But once the program was established, there was very little intake on the program. Maybe it's changed in that community in my experience, but there is some ownership and obligations from individuals to participate with this program. There's investments from them. It would be subsidized by the taxpayer. There's no question. We would not recoup through licensing unless you establish that license fee to recoup those costs. It's unlikely that you recoup it annually due to the likelihood of not being a high license cost, my guess, but also the intake. I don't believe is going to be a large intake by citizens of Innisfail. That's my guess.
Worship, through to Councillor Reberger, I don't see a large cost. I don't know how many dogs we have in Innisfail. There's a licensing program there. There's a licensing program for cats. We have our Director of Fire Services. He does fire permit inspections, and I think if the plan is submitted, which according to the draft guidelines, you'd have to submit your coop sizes, that it would just be a matter of no different than inspecting a fire pit. You go out, if it's built that way, and you're right, if it's $10,000, there's more to than just the $10,000 for the eggs that you're going to get. We just finished talking about mental health, and some of the comments that I've got back, it's the little ones. My grandkids, my kids would like to have an urban hen, and it's more of I guess in summary there, I don't see it being a big cost, but that would be something that would be monitored over time. And if it doesn't pan out after whatever the timeline is, a year or two, it can certainly be changed. So those would be my comments.
No question, there'd have to be some strict guidelines to be followed. If you start saying, well, if you get half of these, it's got to be all or none. And I can't see a lot of people once they see this and they're, holy cow, Maybe we'll get a dog. You know, but anyways, that's, I think the things, that's why you have a, you know, trial situation in which you can massage the rules and regs, you know, to extend before you extended it, but yeah. Any other discussion, Councillor Bates?
Yeah, your worship, just comments. So, yeah, it's had quite a bit of press and discussion. I do think there was a bit of a, I do believe there was an expectation created that we might do this as a plebiscite. Um, I understand the rationale that perhaps it shouldn't be. Given, and most of the input that I had as a counselor was, most of the input to me was not in favor. Given that, and given that we're now looking at a pilot project, which would be no more than 5 coops, I'm wondering if one of the things I read in here, and like I say, it's like we've switched gears a little bit. I'm wondering if we could satisfy some of the objections by, I'm looking at one specific factor in here. Maybe someone could tell me why previous pilots or other municipalities haven't been, but to get the agreement of the immediate neighbor as being one of the important criteria for the pilot, because it would be such a small number of people in the town. So I'm just thinking that might be a factor that would satisfy quite a few of the people that are not in favor.
Yeah, you'd require a letter of acceptance to your neighbors, like you would if you're whatever. But yeah, it's a good point too, Calvin. Something to consider. Okay, any other comments? Councillor Harrison?
No, I would agree with
Okay,
Councillor Bates there, and that was one of my comments. Like, you know, I think it needs to be in writing that, you know,
Oh,
an
yeah.
actual, yes, I do agree for my neighbor. So I would agree with Councillor Bates. And I guess going back to the comment around, you know, I'm a little nervous about a pilot when we created an expectation. You know, I don't mind going forth and getting the draft guidelines. I guess the question that I have, if it's on the ballot, then is it going to be just a full-fledged project? Like, would it be, we're going to go urban hens, that's the vote? Or we're going to vote for a pilot on the ballot? You know, I guess that's through the CAO.
that's a good point, Councillor Harrison, because I think you wouldn't, the people that are voting on it might want a lot more information before they would feel comfortable on voting on it too. Like, what does this mean, you know? So you might be stuck with that question by the voter at election time. What are we voting on here? Like, it's like the city of Calgary is considering fluoride, going back to fluoride in their water system. You know, those are big ticket things that affect 100% of the population. So that to me is a plebiscite example. But this, I mean,
Yeah, Your Worship, I guess what concerns me is we did have a discussion, and we may have created an expectation or an interpretation of an expectation last fall around, you know, referendum, plebiscite. Now we're going back and we're going to do a pilot, you know, and it just worries me that there's going to be some negative pushback, and it won't be on chickens. It'll be, now here's council doing something that we thought you were going to do in the fall, and now you're going off to do a pilot for 2 years. That's what concerns me. You know, it's, and it won't have anything to do with chickens. I'm sorry, that's, That's the red herring.
So your worship, I think that's a valid point, Councillor Harrison, and through to CEO Becker. I know he had some issues around the last online survey as far as suggestions. People may have been voting twice on one side and the other. So if we wanted that public participation, is that something that we could look at doing again, except maybe doing it so people couldn't vote twice and they had to be Innisfail residents? Because I think what Councillor Harrison is saying is correct in some regards. We have set that expectation that we're going to go back to the public and get their feedback. And now we're not, but, or do you think it's so benign? 5 licenses are so benign, it doesn't really matter.
There's a couple of things to that. There's Councillor Barkley and Councillor Harrison. So there's been no commitment to, we have not posed a question. You have not confirmed a question on the ballot. So you've had deliberation, you had debate on moving it into the ballot. That's in the chambers. That's where you do your business. Media picks up on that and they report out accordingly. So of course the community has heard that may be coming to the ballot. What I'd say, if you wanted to go back to community, then we're going back to redo a full public engagement program. We're not going to do survey. Survey may be it, but we're going to go back, apply the IAP2, which is my new word, letters of the day, because I took some training, so smart now. That's but we're going to use your policy IAP2 to develop an IAP2 public engagement strategy. So we don't know what that looks like. We'd have to come back to you what it could look like, I guess. To me, we're in a position, this is a decision that's, you're going to get some criticism whether you do a pilot project or you don't do a pilot project. To me, in my own opinion, you can put it on the ballot, but this is not fluoride related type of significance. To me, this is minus all the acknowledgement that, hey, we could have did this better, differently. The survey kind of put us in a difficult spot, but council's in a position to say, put on the ballot. Let's don't do this right now. Let's just wait till even the election's over. Let new council review this. Or you know what, this is really what the community is telling me right now. This is what I feel is right. Let's do a 2-year pilot project. And you're going to get feedback on the good and on the bad. There's no question, but you can weather that. That's why you're here.
Yeah.
But to me, there was no guarantee that was going to be on the ballot. There's only, as you read the resolutions, it was bring back what it would look like. But you know, the media, of course, reporting on your meeting saying, hey, it's going to come as a referendum or a plebiscite. And that was all fair because that was part of your public dialogue. But you have a right to say, no, we don't want to do this on the ballot.
But I don't recall having a public discussion about it being on the election vote. Was it in the minutes in that regard?
It's
Yes.
in,
Yeah.
Was it? Okay, anyways. Yeah, I think, but if you're going to have, we've got to do an education program before the election on what people are voting on. Can't just leave it and put it on the ballot, because like Councillor Harrison said, you know, they're gonna want to know the details here of what they're voting on. So we're gonna make sure we have this all clarified. You point out, well, you gotta have the permission or cooperation with your neighbors, that type of thing. Then it's a little different story. You know, well, you gotta have everybody on your side around you. So
Well,
I think that's what scares more than a lot of people.
I think your worship, the first step probably is the motion, right, that Councillor Hill made, and that administration will develop a bylaw to bring back for us to look over, and then we can have further discussion at that time and see what it looks like and what changes that we might like to see, and go from there and decide at that point in time. So, but this is drafting the bylaw is the first step.
No, I agree with you, Councillor Barkley. All right, any further discussion?
So yeah, I'll just, it's almost repetitive, but I can support the motion, I think. But I think I do need to say that down the road, as the thing is drafted, that it would be important to me that you get the approval of the neighbors, at least the direct neighbor on each side. And, or unless separated by whatever, however the administration does it. And at that point, I can support, what we're doing here today. So,
Okay. No further discussion, and the motion is to proceed with the draft of some form of the bylaw to come back to us with. Okay? All in favor of the motion? Carried unanimously. Thank you.
So just part of that, just on the messaging. So the bylaw is going to come to you. It's going to look similar to what you see in that program. So the messaging, we'll figure it out is the high road is, what we started this process with the intent of some public interest. There was an engagement process that we learned from. We did talk about putting it to the ballots to have, just to kind of resolve some of those uncertainties on the engagement side to make it this is a true engagement through a ballot. And here we are today to look at the bylaw, and you may not wish to proceed based on that bylaw, but I think there's some messaging from council that could help explain to the community why we're
Just
reviewing the bylaw at this date.
Okay.
Your worship, through to CEO Becker. So when do we start the process? I have 2 or 3 comments regarding the bylaw, and Councillor Bates had a comment. When do you want to start to have that discussion to help Vanessa frame what this new draft might look like?
Sooner the better, and now would be
Would that
appropriate.
now be
Well,
fine?
absolutely, if you want, or
Oh,
just could
okay.
be turned in on
Sure.
to the administration. Huh?
Yeah. I guess further to Councillor Bates' comment, I would fully agree that I think we need actual permission, just not, a discussion with my neighbor, and I sort of interpreted that he might like chickens, and so it's something formal, maybe a form. I don't know what the other municipalities have to grab that. And then under the PID, does that include to get that license, you need to show proof of the training that you've had through the Urban Hen Alberta program, or is that something different? Because I really think we need to show that the person has taken the course for how to harbor hens. And that could be something that's part of the package when you apply, right? So however you work that in, so proof of training. And then any coop plans, it sort of gray there about, it's certain sizes of coops, but I think I suggest that it be more specific, as actually the plans actually come in to be reviewed, much the same as a development permit or whatever, right, to actually approve the plans. So yeah, that's about, and I think the rest of the bylaw, you did a great job, Vanessa. I think it captures the intent of what we want to do. So there, kudos to Vanessa. Well, by the way, how long was that course? Was it? Because you've taken it, right? You're a certified hen raiser.
I am.
Yeah,
Not
I
that I'm
know.
going to use it, but I think it was 3 hours,
3 hours.
3 hours online
It's on an online
on
course?
Zoom. I think they had one yesterday.
Oh,
I'll
okay.
check when the next one is. They're
Yeah.
usually on a
And-
Sunday.
no cost?
It was $65, $68, I believe.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So that would be part of the CEO Becker, part of the communication. Because I know there's people out there that are waiting for something to come that they can apply. So, yeah. And they may change their minds after they see what they need to do to get a permit. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments that you'd like to give Vanessa? Okay, we'll proceed. Council remuneration policy review.
So this policy is attached to the agenda for council review. As it states that council through an ad hoc committee would be formed to review the remuneration policy and any remuneration halfway through the council term and then during the election year. So we are in the election year, so the policy states that we would then start conducting research, look for individuals, I believe I think it's through members at large again, to undertake that review and advise council on remuneration. So just an FYI, I think there is some interest to make some adjustments to the policy. So yeah, so it's for your information.
I mean, adjustments to the policy. Oh, Councillor Huber.
So for whatever reason, I was looking through this and I saw a couple things on here that I thought we should probably address. And one is under guidelines where it says the monthly base honorarium includes 2 council meetings per month. And then it states council receive an annual cost of living allowance increase. And I think we should delete that line about the cost of living increase because in the 8 years I've been on council, we've never done that. And it's redundant because further it says that we're going to review of council remuneration and benefits. We have the ad hoc committee to decide that for us every 2 years. So I think that's a redundant line that's not being used. So I think we should strike that. And then the other one under per diems, it states what the mayor and councillors get for per diems per day. And then it states council members must submit per diem requests on the prescribed form to the mayor for approval. And I'd like to add a line that says the mayor would submit their form to the deputy mayor for approval so that we have complete transparency and all the timesheets are being signed off. So that was the 2 things I saw in there that I thought we should address. So I brought that up for discussion.
Does everybody understand those? Yeah. Okay, do we need a motion to change this, or is this just to this policy?
Council has a few options. I believe you can go ahead and make those amendments through actually it'd go to your next regular council meeting for approval, or
Yeah,
you could table it until we maybe apply those deletions or adjustments, and have the committee also review the policy on your behalf. And then once the process is concluding, we can come back with a clean policy for you.
okay.
I think that's like to just do it all at once would be appropriate, like once there's other changes to be made.
And is it clear on here who picks the committee?
I think council can approve it through, we advertise in the community, anyone interested to serve on this ad hoc committee, and then you'd approve who would sit on that committee.
And then you bring the that list to council and they pick 3 people out of it
Correct.
or something. I can't remember the last time we did it.
So
Okay,
based on this conversation, we would start advertising for those individuals, come back to you. You can select and then we'd orientate the
Okay.
committee and at the same time, we'll start some evaluation, start gathering that research information.
okay.
Your worship. So I agree with Councillor Reberger's suggestions, and I have one other observation that I've always felt when you look at the mileage on usually anything that is mileaged is usually highly paid, but I just happen to notice, and I don't think many of us hardly ever claim mileage, but I know I'm personally at home processing something on 2020 mileage with Revenue Canada, it's 59 cents per kilometer, and I think we're at 50. And I looked it up before I came, and in 2012, Revenue Canada was 53. So it's probably another correction that it wouldn't, whatever we choose, it isn't Revenue Canada unless there's an average there, because the first 5,000 kilometers are the numbers I just stated.
Well, if we can have administration review that. I'm not sure if you have to follow specific guidelines, but
It states it is what I'm saying, so we should
Oh, okay, I see.
abandon it or do something different,
okay,
whatever.
all right. Okay. Does someone want to make a motion that we proceed with these changes to this policy?
I don't, we can't make that motion in this meeting, I don't believe.
Right. You can agree on the changes.
Okay.
We come back with a
All
clear.
right, you want to leave it totally? Okay, I'm just saying to advance it. Okay,
So maybe the motion is we recommend to regular council adjustments to the council
yeah,
remuneration policy as discussed or something like that.
Sure, I make that motion.
all in favor of the motion? Carried, thank you. All right. Business license review, 3.5.
So just, I thought I'd be prepared to have some further detailed conversation with council regarding the business license bylaw. It's really there as information today. So we do have to go back into the bylaw and highlight some of the suggested changes. So today I'm not prepared to do that with council. If we could just take it as FYI today, I would appreciate that.
All right, discussion.
Well, I guess your worship, through to CEO Becker, are you going to bring back some recommendations on how to strengthen this bylaw, I'm assuming, or make changes if necessary and at a future meeting?
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Councilor Barkley will show highlighted areas of suggested changes and go through more detail with you. Right today, I wasn't quite prepared to do that.
So do you need a motion for us to request administration to proceed with that?
I think they have that already, just as information.
Okay.
We're just gonna make, your worship, you're looking at me, so I guess I'm recognized. Just as people are discussing this, one thing to look at, I guess, is that by the bylaw number, that the last time this was done is 2013, so it's been a while.
Okay,
Your worship, through to Todd, just a suggestion. I didn't see anything in here, so maybe in the rewrite, we could mention We need to adhere to provincial and federal statutes around the law. Like, I'll just give the example of what happened over the last 2 or 3 weeks here. There's town procedures, policies, and everything, and it was actually a provincial statute and a federal statute that were being violated, right? So maybe just to capture that, we need to take in the full spectrum of the law. Or
Your worship, to Councillor Harrison, I think the draft bylaw will certainly seek your council's advice on what level of enforcement you want to apply to provincial, federal legislation, I guess I could say. So right now, we have not determined what level wording would be applied, but you'll need to determine what level enforcement you want to use with this bylaw.
So do we need a motion?
I would move we accept this as for information.
Okay. Councillor Reberger.
And then just a comment that with regards to what Councillor Harrison referenced, I'm a little nervous about putting things into our bylaw that references provincial and federal things that we are going to try and enforce. I don't know if that's where a municipality should be going.
Yeah, your worship, but I kind of I support Councillor Reberger's comments in the sense that, that there's other levels that enforce that kind of thing. Whether they get enforced or not is another thing, but I'm assuming that you're getting some legal advice around this and where we can go as a municipality and what is our role to play. Okay.
I think there has to be, wouldn't you think though, that we'd have some, we've got some responsibility or obligation for issuing someone a license that it indicates that it has to follow the course of the legal direction of the law or the regulations.
Well, I think it should say that if we're giving you a business license, you have to follow all applicable Alberta health regulations or whatever else is applicable.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's up to us to enforce those.
Worship, I wasn't suggesting that we got into the enforcement end of it, but there is no mention in there with that example of Alberta Health, for example, that there's nothing there that they have to follow up provincial. So however the legal beagles figure that out and with our CAO, yeah. But I'm certainly not saying that our CPOs have to run around and enforce. And I don't suggest that we enforce provincial statutes, but I think there needs to be some mention around you have to follow the provincial statutes. I don't know how that wording works, but
Okay. Any other discussion? All in favor of the motion? Carried. Thank you. All right. Director Jenkins has a report for us on the arena.
All right, so we're looking to get council input on pursuing the removal of the red ice surface at the arena for the remainder of the 2020-2021 season due to the continued impacts of the COVID-19 restrictions. Our facility booking policy outlines that ice is to be maintained on both surfaces through the last Sunday in March each year. With the ongoing restrictions and the changes that we received last Friday, we're looking to remove the red ice surface to reduce maintenance and utility costs. We have been in contact with the primary ice users, being Innisfail Minor Hockey and the Figure Skating Club, to discuss these impacts. Last week when we talked to figure skating, they had said that if restrictions extended beyond February 15th, they would not be looking to resume their group programs, but would consider their individual programs, and that would be about an hour and a half of ice per day. So again, based on the restrictions we got last week, we are limited certainly to those individual programs, and would be in further contact with figure skating. Innisfail Minor Hockey still remains uncertain about the potential of league play. They had announced that they were going to make some decisions today. I haven't heard if anything came out from Hockey Alberta. But again, with the restrictions being in place at least until the end of February, any sort of hockey activity would definitely be limited to practices or informal gameplay. Both organizations could be accommodated on the blue ice surface for the level of play potentially possible for the remainder of a typical ice user season. And both have indicated a willingness to work together if they are able to take on any type of activity. So yeah, the arena's been closed since December 8th and has been subject to restrictions on team play since early November. We'd like to move forward with taking that red ice out as early as this week. And then it will be available if there's potential for dry surface use, if restrictions change as well.
Okay, thanks, Megan. I think, again, we can't make a decision here today. So I'm not quite sure how to proceed with this.
This is operational in nature, council. If council's adamant that no, so I think you can give that direction. This is operational. I'll take full responsibility due to the political potential of it. And it's your policy, is of course, as well. But if you wanted to wait for a week, certainly you could do that. But I think you have that ability to make that decision today.
Absolutely. Time is of the essence here right now, so I'm clarifying that. Do you want to discuss it before?
Yes, your worship.
Motion, okay.
I'll make the motion so then we can start this discussion.
Please.
That we remove the ice, red ice surface commencing February 2nd, 2021.
Okay. All in favor of the motion?
No, we're going to discuss.
Oh, we want to discuss.
Whoa.
Megan, I tried.
So your worship, sorry.
Go ahead,
So,
Councillor Bates, I'm sorry.
I have one request, and that would be, since there was the model introduced last Friday, that administration touch base one more time with the user groups, because something might have transpired this weekend, and I do not want something future on Facebook that says that council mandated that this happened without discussion. And I think I'd like to see that connection. And I'm not really sure that Hockey Alberta has announced what is in the text here. I think they've left it so far up to the leagues that
They did post something, I think it was early last week, that Hockey Alberta came out that if there weren't announcements made by February 1st, that they would be ending or canceling league play for this
let's make sure
season.
we touch base with our user groups. That's my caveat. Thank you.
Yeah, your worship, through to, I guess, Director Jenkins, I would support that. In fact, I wouldn't even mind leaving it one more week, just because I think things are a little bit up in the air right now. And without question, Hockey Alberta said on the weekend, if they weren't able to play by February 1st, that they would cancel league games. And then you hear the conversations about maybe trying to push some hockey into May. So I don't know whether that's been ever brought up with minor hockey here or not, but I fully support taking that ice out if we're not going to use it, because it does open it up for You know, the people like lacrosse that came to see us last week, and how many other user groups, if we do get to stage 2, are going to need a bigger space to have their activities. I think of movers and groovers, there's no way you're going to fit 100 people into the library anytime soon, but maybe they could fit 20 into the arena at some point in time in the next phase or something. Yeah, like Councillor Bates, I don't want to pull the plug too soon, and then just because things seem to be very up in the air, and despite the new guidelines.
Any other discussion? Councillor Young?
Just a question then, under our policy there, we wouldn't be leaving, there wouldn't be a possibility of leaving the blue ice in past the end of March?
I guess that would be another conversation for this group.
Yeah, because I can't see, I mean, minor hockey didn't even get through tiering back in November, so I can't see, you know, them going forward with any kind of formal program. I just don't see so yeah, I agree if you, you know, call the 2 user groups and nothing's changed, let's take the ice out, because
So just a point of clarification with the discussion that's been made. It's the motion that was made is that commences February 2nd, which would be tomorrow. Is it appropriate to amend the motion to extend it a week, or are we going to vote on the motion that was made?
You can do both. Councillor Hill, you can be in the motion maker, you can amend your motion.
Okay. All right, well, I would like to amend my motion to grant an extra week onto that, just to allow any other issues to be fully explored before we pull the ice out of the red arena. So adding a week to February 2nd would be my motion. I don't have a calendar, so. Oh yeah, I guess it doesn't state the actual day of the week. It would just be adding 2 numbers. So yes, February 9th, 2021. Thanks, Danny. You're a scholar. That's my motion amendment. Thank you.
Okay. I think, you know, it would have been appropriate too on the original motion to say that pending administration contacting all of the users if they have no objection. But if you want to give it another week, that's another week of expense, that's all. Okay, now you amended the motion. Any other discussion? All right, then we'll vote on the amendment first. Those in favor of the amendment to the motion, is that correct?
That's correct. It's the ladder system. So,
Yeah.
yep.
All right, all in favor of the amendment to the
Yeah.
motion? You're not in favor of the amendment? Okay. Opposed? Now on the, I'm sorry, I'm on Reberger's side too, by the way. And then we'll vote on the original motion and to move forward with the closure of the red ice service.
You agreed upon the amendment. So now you vote on that motion, but it's February the 9th.
As, yes, okay.
Yeah.
As amended to February the 9th, okay?
Your worship, can I ask a question? So seeing as the amendment created some extra discussion, I guess the question that I have is, again, it's in my opinion, I don't know that those dates are that critical as long as we absolutely have certainty from the user groups. And if it's going to result in a significant expense to run it another week, I'd hate to see us just, as long as I'm just trying to get my feelings across, that it needs to be the user groups that are driving this at this point. And because there is the uncertainty, and we don't know, like if they're allowed to play 3-on-3 or something, or I don't know what they're, who knows what they might be allowed to do, and they might break their teams down and you might have more need for ice time than you have any idea. But as long as they are, because I have no idea what's going on, that's they're the ones that are sitting there too with.
So maybe,
So I guess I'm just trying to not drive it. They got extra week and even a day, like it could be Monday, it could be Friday. Like there's no point in keeping it in over the weekend. You know, there's all kinds of stuff that could be different.
so how about based on the approval or support of the users?
I mean,
That's where I want to see it be driven by, not by the date as much.
I could appreciate the situation that the users are in. They don't know, and and it's difficult for them. And I can't see them saying, well, no, just take it out. I'm sure they'll say, well, maybe there's a chance, but it's shred of hope there, but you keep the ice just in case. I don't know. Sometimes you got to make a hard decision.
What Megan is stating, that's the the conversation has been, they don't require the red ice.
Both groups have been very supportive that they'll work with what we have. And then even the comment about extending the ice, it was even minor hockey that threw out that, if there is a potential that Hockey Alberta would extend the season, they would make do with what they could get. They've both been very receptive to working with each other or working together. And I think they're in the same boat that we are, as, we're all trying to predict the future. But I think, based on what the province has released, we're at least 3 weeks after the 8th before there would be any relaxations. And then no guarantee that means any kind of team activity. So.
Well, I think your worship, Megan, Director Jenkins, if you're confident in that, I would also like to see you, and maybe you do have that dialogue in writing from both groups, just because of what's going on in the community, just for your protection.
Okay.
And yeah.
Yeah, so I guess chiming back in again, so if you get that should be that could be the trigger. It doesn't have to be the date. And it's happened after the premier's model. So I don't know. Do we need a new motion or what do we do?
Yes, your worship, I'd like to rescind that motion that was butchered earlier.
So the one that we voted on. Okay.
Practice.
Make a motion now.
So now we need a second, a new amendment then.
So your worship, I'm just a bit confused. Are we voting on the February 2nd date, or are we leaving that kind of open for Director Jenkins to speak with the user groups, and then decision will be made based on that, leaving that in her hands? Without a specific date. I mean, you may not hear back tomorrow from both organizations. So
Okay, does everybody agree with that? Okay.
Yeah, well, I just think it should, I think the motion should be that council supports the removal of the red ice at the arena commencing February 2nd, 2021, or upon a written approval from the user groups.
Okay. All right, further discussion? No, we've done enough. All in favor of the motion? Carried, thank you. All right, Director Kennedy on 42nd and 49th Ave.
So I'm just here to provide council a quick update on the review of the intersection at 42nd Street and 49th Ave completed by Altera Engineering. The existing configuration of the intersection was reviewed based on level of service, turning warrants, and signalization warrants. Video footage recorded by Altera over a 3.5-day period confirmed the safety concerns noted by the town. Altera interpreted the video footage in conjunction with the findings of various site triangle scenarios that the primary contributor of the lack of the safety are confusion of the current configuration, neglecting of existing traffic controls, and judgment of oncoming traffic. With the findings, Altera has comprised a list of recommendations for the immediate actions to long-term planning for an ultimate reconfiguration. Option 1 in regards to the immediate recommendations. In short, it's the lowest cost, simplest is to put a flashing beacon on top of the stop sign, or we've did a little more research and you can actually get a stop sign with LED lights put into it as a alternative. This would help bring attention to the stop sign for those who may be missing them, as well as a reminder who are ignoring of the presence and the requirement to stop. Come spring and summer, Altera recommends repainting of the intersection, which was part of in our operating plan, as well as they did a little research, and in previous air photos, they did notice the word stop painted onto the pavement prior to the intersection, which is also a recommendation from Altera. Should the installation of the flashing beacon or the additional signage not decrease the near miss incidents, Altera recommends converting the intersection to a 4-way stop. Moving to a 4-way stop should aid in limiting the incidents, even if travelers continue to commit traffic infractions, such as the rolling stop and north and southbound through traffic, would theoretically no longer be traveling at full speed. Secondly, they suggest that the separation of the turning lanes off with barricades. This simplification of the intersection would help with any confusion that may be arising. Along with these closures, the concrete islands should be rounded off to allow for larger turning radiuses for the larger trucks. Ultimate scenario, long-term, the recommendation is to look at doing a roundabout. A quick review of the intersection area does see that the standard 1-lane roundabout would fit within that area, or alternatively, mini roundabout could be used. Mini roundabouts would allow more room for sidewalks and less reconstruction, but they would not provide the same level of speed control. In either option, the residential property in the southwest quadrant of the intersection should be investigated further. The existing driveway location is in a poor location to the intersection and will only become more of a hazard with reconfiguration. So further, obviously, design on the ultimate scenario. It is administration's recommendation proceed with the first recommendation in regards to adding a lighted stop sign and added painting, and we'll evaluate the intersection over the next year to see if that helps reduce any of the incidents. In regards to financial impacts, the cost for the improvements would be able to be covered under the roads operating budget. So I'd just like to take this and just have this as information for council and take any questions.
Well, I guess I'm willing to move that we accept this for information, and then let's have the questions.
Okay. Discussion. Yes.
Through to Director Kennedy, would it be worthwhile to identify the stop signs with a 2-way stop bar? I see that's done in other areas where there's been, the one that I can think of was Mackenzie Road and 30th Avenue in Red Deer. They had that clearly identified as a two-way stop? Like they put the four-way bars on most when it's a four-way stop. But would it help to have one that says two-way, just because people do, I think a lot of the confusion is people coming up, pulling up and thinking it's a four-way stop. So I think maybe the addition of those two little bars might take away some of that confusion for the little bit that it would cost to do that. Because I go through that intersection lots and I think that would help. And by that, I mean, I run the stop signs.
Your worship, through the Director Kennedy, do you have an idea if you move into the immediate recommendation, how long that would be monitored for?
We recommend that we monitor it through the summer because it will take us some time to get the intersection painted as well. So.
Okay, any other discussion? So we'll proceed with that that process for the initial stages, but anyways, all in favor of the motion? Carried. Thank you. Highway 54 intersection, Mr. Kennedy.
Yep. So further to the request from council for administration to provide or to ask for a written, administration submitted a written request to Alberta Transportation to review the lane or the line configuration at Highway 54 and 42nd Street. In that letter, we also requested a safety review of the intersection of Highway 54 and Lakewood Drive. We did receive an email response from Alberta Transportation regarding both intersections. In brief, for Highway 54 and 42nd Street, their response was the constructed configuration maximizes the town's ability to salvage and expand upon the infrastructure as the Bella Vista development proceeds. Secondly, the constructed configuration enables vehicles making a northbound and westbound movement to safely complete the left-handed turn. Constructed intersection configuration protects left-handed turning vehicles, which is a more critical movement based on the operating speed of the highway. The constructed intersection configuration provides lane continuity through the intersection. And the constructed intersection configuration is compliant with the Alberta Transportation current design standards. The note that we have from them is they appreciate that the development once the development hits milestones, the intersection will be upgraded by the developer. However, the interim situation, the site team decided that the safer option was to have a protected area for northbound left turning traffic to avoid stationary vehicles and truck blocking the through lane when turning left. For Highway 54 and Lakewood Drive, based on the information that Alberta Transportation has and the relatively low accident rate, there's no scope to alter the existing configuration. The intersection was previously designed to meet traffic warrants, and the 2020 stage construction had no impact on those warrants, so the pre-existing road markings were reinstated. They do believe, though, that they didn't actually increase the pre-existing tapers for both left turn vehicles that exceeded the actual current standards. So that's the information we were given from Alberta Transportation. We have not heard back in regards to the reduction of the speed limit along Highway 54. So I'd like to just have this for information for council.
So just to revisit the other intersection on 42nd Street. What are they saying? There's nothing wrong with it the way it is now.
Yeah, so what they're saying is it does meet their standards, and they did it almost to preamble the future development for Bella Vista, because once Bella Vista hits a certain volume, I believe an additional lane on the west side has to be built. So this just better suits that future growth.
And I do wonder if they've got the recent accident stats on Lakewood and 54th, because there's been some doozies there. And I'm guessing I can think back of 4 or 5 in the last 3 or 4 years, or 5 maybe years. But anyways, there's been some pretty serious situations there that, and it's people passing on the right. The guy that's turning left, they're passing on the right. It's okay to do that if you're going south, but if you're going north, that isn't a through lane.
Mhm.
People turn left coming from the north. The guy nails them from the turn lane, right turn lane on the northbound. But anyways, I think, I think it should be revisited, that one, and see if they are up to date on their accident numbers. And to me, for them to say that there hasn't been an issue, well, it's only a matter of time, and it's going to be some life lost there. So it'd be nice to, but to take no, I know that 42nd Street one, it's always been the usual, the answer is that who's going to pay for it? That's always been a question, and it's not cheap to start doing intersections on highways. But everybody kind of is just sitting back, don't want to touch it. It's going to be too expensive. So I don't know what our solution is going to be there.
Yeah, I don't know if that's something that the town's willing to go into. In regards to the accident rates, they did state that they did review the information of the accident rates, so to go off their email.
So are we entitled to ask for a speed reduction? Simple speed reduction?
We have submitted that request for a speed reduction.
At what, 42nd?
Do you remember the limit?
From
Lakewood
south
to
of 42nd up past Lakewood. But
Yeah.
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 So this is where, if council, this is administration to administration, you have a full right to disagree with that information correspondence. And the next logical step would be to advance on to conversation with the Minister of Alberta Transportation.
Okay, so clarification again, are we waiting for a response on this
So,
speed reduction?
so we submitted a request administration to administration on the speed limit reduction last year. And they came back with a similar response that said, currently the development warrants and the traffic don't require a speed limit reduction. So after our discussion here a couple weeks ago, we drafted a letter on the speed limit reduction that was sent to the Minister of Transportation, as opposed to just the Alberta Transportation engineers. So we haven't received a response on that, our submission to the minister.
Yeah. Councillor Barkley.
Your worship, through to Director Kennedy or Jenkins, do you get accident statistics? Like are those available to you, or?
I don't get them, but I know they're available.
Yeah.
Yeah, we could. And I'm sure they base their intersection, like it says, relatively low accident rate. So intersections, I'm sure, are based on a certain amount of accident.
Yeah, to me, it's maybe not so much the amount, as particularly Lakewood and Highway 54, it's the severity that I think we've seen over the last 3 or 4 years. So,
Your worship? I think specifically to Highway 54 in Lakewood, probably, I don't know, might want to check the date on their letter. I'm betting we had one since they wrote the letter. And I'm confused by one of their statements here. I don't know if it's a typo. However, I believe for both southbound left turn bays, we have 2 southbound left turn bays. What's a bay?
So the turning bay would be the southbound of the intersection. As you turn onto the highway, there's a bay of acceleration.
So are
And
they
then-
referring to both intersections?
No, both lanes. So what they did is extended both acceleration, kind of your time that you can merge in. They're stating that they extended those.
Yeah, I'm still confused. 2 southbound left turn bays. I'm thinking maybe both southbound and northbound left turn bays. I don't know. There's 2 left turn bays
Well, that's what there is, yeah.
southbound.
So
No, yeah, one each way.
So yeah, it might be just a wording.
Yeah,
but-
well,
But there is two lanes of acceleration going southbound at the intersection.
I'm reading 2 southbound.
Yeah,
I'm using the word both into 2 southbound left turn bays. I could see there being a southbound and a northbound left turn bay. Anyway, that's being small, but I'm betting they don't have a good statistics. Like even the last accident out there was only, what, 2 weeks ago?
Yeah, and we did receive this, I don't have the date, I should put the date on there, I apologize, but
So
I
they wouldn't
believe
have
it was within the last 2 weeks. we
That
received this.
precipitated our,
Yeah.
well, okay. I think we go forward and ask them some more or go to the next step.
So what I suggest, Steve, Megan, we bring back those letters that were submitted administratively, put in the council pack next week. We'll have the stats through enforcement likely and provide all that information, and you may choose to advance conversation with the province.
all right.
I believe we did submit them as an information package when we issued them,
Oh,
so we can bring them forward again.
yeah, I think so.
Okay,
And your worship, through to Director Kennedy, maybe when you bring those back, if we had some information on the severity of the accident, not just there was an accident, because I think that's an important part of the conversation.
okay. Do we need a motion, Mr. Becker? Yeah, okay. All right, you'll get back to us with some more information then. Thank you. All right. I think that concludes our business agenda. Roundtable. Councillor Hill, are you up to snuff? Or?
Thank you, Your Worship. Since there's no more motions to be made at this time by myself, I'll feel free to speak. No, I haven't been up to too terribly much. It was a nice, beautiful day today, and yeah, that's about all for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I have MPC tomorrow and I forgot a specific, when I made my report last week on Red Deer Municipal User Group, the executive officer, Keith Ryder, is given his notice that this is his last year. So they do have a fairly large pair of shoes to fill in that organization, because I think he's been it since they founded it. And so they'll work on that, and get a committee and that sort of thing, but it's kind of important that we know that.
Okay. Councillor Barclay?
Yeah, I have MPC tomorrow and then IAP2 training on Wednesday for 3 hours, and just out and about and getting lots of feedback on various things. So that's about all right now.
I know, Councillor Barclay, you've been following the coal mining situation in Alberta a bit, and do you have anything you can shed on us? I know it's a case of,
Well, I'm far from the coal mining expert, but yeah, I follow it, or people send me information.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think there's so many groups involved with it. I'm sure Councillor Bates, they obviously discussed it last week at RD Mug, and there's CPAWS and there's the Livingstone group down in Southern Alberta. And I know it seems recently the news around the Nordegg area and what's going on out there. So I'm not sure where it's at. I think there's a court challenge as far as I know that's taking place to put that coal policy, 1976 coal policy back in because there was zero consultation around removing it, but I don't know. I think there are some municipalities involved for sure. I believe High River and Okotoks and Lethbridge and a few communities have sent letters supporting putting that coal policy back in, but I don't know impacts on Red Deer River and stuff. I haven't seen specific details other than, you know, anything's going to impact all the headwaters because the snow and the water runs down the mountain and that's where our headwaters come from. But
Yeah, I think it's certainly is, it should be everyone's concern though. But it's what I've been seeing of it too is you have no idea how much permanent damage is done by these coal mines and the long-term effect. And you see some of these abandoned mines with these tail ponds and full of junk and chemicals and arsenic and everything else. So it's pretty detrimental to the environment. So you got to wonder, I guess, if the economic development is worth it, the environmental impact to these vulnerable areas. But anyways, I'm hoping that the authorities have, but I don't think I saw, Gene, any form of a public open discussion about these projects
well,
either.
I think that's the problem. And
Yeah.
the email I sent yesterday that was sent on to me there, I mean, it seems that it was kind of partially done in 2019 before Albertans really knew about it. And I'm just going by what I see in these emails. I mean, I have no inside information, but yeah, it's a concern. I think, you know, there's a lot of concern around, I have heard 1% royalties, and that may be $2 million a year in revenue. I don't know whether that's fact or not, but maybe if we want more information, maybe we should be reaching out to somebody for an A&P meeting, like I don't know, I'll throw a name, Kevin Van Teekum or somebody out there who would probably be more than happy to present to us and give us more information. I think the Red Deer Watershed Alliance is certainly involved as well. So I think it'd be wise to get through more information from reliable sources other than me, because I'm not. But we should be keeping an eye on this and how it's going to impact our water without question.
Your worship, through to Councillor Barkley. Yeah, I think the emails that you sent today, Councillor Boda from Red Deer County was one of the co-chairs with the RDR mug, and I think she should, my advice to her, if I was, would be to work through her representative, Philip Maskey, and he's not known to be a real quiet individual, and he should send that through to the executive director, and I'm sure it would get out to other members. That would be my advice. And
Well,
I know
it has been. She sent it to me as well to send it out to our council and other people. It's not that she's trying to usurp anybody's position or on a committee. She just wanted to make sure that this information is being shared. That's all.
No, I guess if it was when I get it, then though, it's almost like I feel obligated to send it to RDR mug, and I'm doing it on behalf of other people. So yeah, I would certainly encourage that. And I do know our mug is meeting with Watershed Alliance in the next week, I believe. So I think there'll be some attention paid to it, along with public opinion, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Gus Reber.
So I attended the library meeting last week via Zoom. Their curbside's been going really good for the books. They do get a lot of traffic in their parking lot using the Wi-Fi. And you heard that they're hoping to get some of their other programs moving. I had my first subdevelopment appeal board meeting last week. It was an interesting experience, and kind of got a better feel for it. It's one thing to take a course, it's another thing to put it into action. And I think we might have a historical village meeting by Zoom. They haven't done that yet, but there's a rumor that they're going to try it. So we'll see if that happens or not. And then just a point of order, I think we had a motion for the accepting the information on Highway 54, but we didn't vote on it.
We need a volunteer for Sergeant of Arms here. Okay, as a point of order, I think we should go back and revisit that motion. Are everybody familiar with what that motion was? More information on 54?
Mhm.
Okay. All in favor of the motion? Carried. Thank you. Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a couple of things. I completed director's training for the chamber here last Wednesday, and also sat in on their strategic planning exercise later in the same day. It was a long day. It was about 10 hours by the time we got done. Just like to say that the chambers changed or proposing to change their focus to more advocacy and education. And there was great discussion around values and goals and strategies in that. So I guess the action is, words are one thing, but we'll have to see what the actions come of that. But looking at the board configuration, the new board, I'm quite confident that it's going to take some time, but I'm quite confident that they're headed in the right direction. So we just got to give it some time to gel. I have a question for Director Weimark. Can you give us an update on the taxi licenses? Please?
Sure. So we changed that bylaw.
Mhm.
The Associated Cab from Red Deer came in and purchased 3, and that's where it's sitting. So it's under review right now. It will go to the Transportation Committee first.
Okay.
And then brought back to here.
So we didn't lose any service. We still have.
Nope, same ones and the same 3 drivers. And when I spoke to the cab owner, he was good. He got the rumble from the social media. Johnny phoned him direct because they happen to be friends. So they had a conversation. So then he came back to me because it was a different story. So once we talked one-on-one, he didn't realize actually that's what the bylaw said because he's a new owner.
Okay.
Of it. So he bought it last year. So he didn't realize that he had the monopoly of licenses. And so he too agreed that wasn't probably very fair. And he does like competition. So, and because they only have 3 drivers here, it's not harming him as much as was interpretation of what he thought was happening. So.
Okay, great. Good. Glad to hear that. Thanks, Heather.
Okay. The letter that we sent off to Premier Kenny, I did get confirmation that he got the letter before the announcements there the other day. So, and thanking us for the letter. I think it probably helps them a little bit, but we didn't get any information back on small business support yet. But I know they're revisiting that. That's a critical one, I think, too, for the small business, because this is not going to go away for quite a while yet. So, anyways, they appreciated it. I don't think I have anything else. Director Kennedy, have you got anything? No. Director Weimark. Director Jenkins. Ken, you got anything? No? Stuart? No? Vanessa? CAO Becker. You get upset when I miss you, so.
Annual report.
Okay. All right. I guess we are out in this world of reality. Is there anyone out that's been following us on the internet as far as the operations? We'd entertain your opportunity this time to come in and ask us if you have any questions. No? Okay. Well, if not, we'll proceed. We have an in-camera item. I guess, would someone like to move that we go in camera?
Your worship, I'll move that we move in camera.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. All in favor? Carrie, take a break for a couple minutes.